Okay. So pets, dogs, everything has its alertness. So the alertness of a dog, the alertness of an ant, alertness of a human, alertness of a bird, alertness of a snake, all this alertness is a Mercury function. You'd almost say the whole world is just thoughts in different densities and different frequencies moving around, and it's almost a texture of life, a mental texture. So when we're this Mercury is always a puzzle. So when we start, it's hard to make just a judgment. It's this, it means this, it's this, it's that. We'll do this, but we can do it on many, many layers and many levels. And as your consciousness changes, as your depth thinking, like when you first know astrology, you make a quick association. Oh, you got your moon and Aries impulse, if you go. But when you start doing the layers of the different things, you start getting a more deeper thinking, a deeper association. They start applying that deeper association to what you're seeing, and you see the deeper connections. So, what's education? What's learning? What's coordination? You know, everything's almost a miracle when you start looking at the mind and how we center in our body, how we move anything, how anything we do requires an alertness and a mental or a nervous coordination to make it happen. And conversely, everything we don't do, everything we don't think about, everything we talk ourselves out of, anytime we get an attitude that's dark or negative, we start diminishing the alertness of our mind. Of course, when we have sorrows or when we feel bad, we want to avoid it. So the mind will go out of its way to try, well, I'll go have a drink, I'll go have some chocolate, I'll go have a coffee, I'll go have anything to avoid thinking about this sad thing, because every time I think of this, I feel bad. So the moon is kind of ganging up on the Mercury to justify not thinking clearly. So whether we make right or wrong judgments, right or wrong insights, we see someone pick up a gun, you see someone fall over and get shot, and you assume the person who picked up the gun shot the person. But it's possible you may not have seen it clearly. That person may have been second on the scene, picked up the gun, that somebody else who just shot the person ran, or someone else had another gun and somebody else shot. It's like there's many puzzles in life of how you see it. It's not always exactly what it is. So how alert, how clear is your mind? How clear is this function? So this is the puzzle of Mercury, and as we come into the signs the Mercury is always close to the sun. So it's either in the same sign as the sun, or the sign before it, or the sign after it. It can never be more than 28 degrees away. So when Mercury is in the same sign as the sun, you can't, the sun's your heart, so you can't separate your mind from your heart. So when you're thinking it's your heart that's thinking, and you're thinking about your heart, and you don't have these functions separated, they work together. So that generally gives an extra strength, but on a spiritual path, when you're trying to separate your mind or separate your heart, it's harder to see that distinction. Whereas if your sun's in one sign and your Mercury is in another sign, whether it's a sign before or after, then you can it's more distinct. You can see the difference between the sun sign, the heart, and the way the mind works. As we grow, we use our mind to see how we can navigate where we're going. In the end, as we get our spiritual life building up, you almost have to calm down the mind and not have it rushing over everything and thinking about everything, and try and get to be quiet sometimes, just be alert in the moment, not thinking, and letting the heart and the feelings, the heart and one's purpose radiate through without words. So there's, on different levels, you need your Mercury to coordinate. At a certain level, when you're in love and things, you have the Mercury shuts down because the higher frequencies are there. I'm just kind of rambling on about it because each planet's always a mystery, and it's hard to know this is exactly fits into this category, this exactly fits. But we're looking at different functional realities. The function of reflection and memory is the moon. The function of being alert and perceptive and being alert and making sense out of things, that's Mercury. Whoa. So many levels of things that we can make sense out of, but then more often than not, we're thinking on on what we're sensing in the moment, and we're often awake to one or two levels of sensation that we're thinking about, and we're closed off or not thinking about all of it. It's very difficult to have all, if you imagine Mercury's a jewel and has all these facets. We're usually very content to look through one lens and look through one facet at a time, but really we're supposed to be able to radiate and look through all of the facets at once and just wonder at the fullness or the complexity and diversity of life. Okay. As a planet, it's the fastest moving planet. It's closest to the sun. It's moving the fastest around 88 days, and it's touching every other one, going around and running, getting close to each of the planets faster than any of the other planets does. So it's considered Mercury is the messenger that talks to one, communicates to the next, talks to the next, and makes all the associations between the planets faster and better than anyone else. So how we communicate, our means of, sometimes you can see Mercury as what someone has to say, but that's difficult. Sometimes you see it as the manner in which you say things. Sometimes you see it as, sometimes you may sense it as how you make sense of things or don't make sense of things, or what bias you take to your thinking. The sign will start bringing in the biases that get you thinking in a certain direction more than others, like a river splitting. It goes one way and another part of it goes another way. It's a puzzle, and wherever it is, there can be a light half. Like any planet has its light side and its dark side. Every function has a good and a bad side, or a brilliant and an ignorant side. So, the first key to thinking well is living properly and eating well, having regular patterns. Then those regular things don't become a disturbance, and it allows our mind to think more clearly about other things. But if we're struggling with how we're feeling in our life and our home or our family and the things there, boy, it takes a lot of our mental processing up so that we're not able to be as alert to what's happening outside. I never knew I was poor, and we were a poor family, struggling to get by, until I went to school and saw all the kids who had all sorts of things and were very rich. I never thought about it. It didn't really bother me because I didn't have the sense of I'm poor. So, okay. There's a process of coming where all of these planets, we're seeing at one level at first. By the time we get through the signs, we'll see one level of functioning. Then by the time we go through the houses, we'll see how it works a bit differently. Then we see the aspects, we see how it deals with stress. Then we look at it in the whole chart. Then we watch timings and watch the events of things, how it gets affected by events in life. Then we start watching the inner attitudes and how it happens, how it evolves spiritually and where it goes in our life. So there's different layers that we have to learn Mercury on. So each of these webinars, I'm going to try and spend about half an hour talking about the planets. So we're just getting a sense of it. And as soon as I finish, well, I've said that. Then there's 10 other things I should have said. Oh, geez, there's more to say. It's always like that. Mercury's like that. But when we start seeing the categories and the signs coming into it, and the categories of the signs, we really do begin to see the distinctions. Well, we see how I think, and we begin to see how other people think differently. So this, and all different shades of differences. We're not always even looking at what anybody else is thinking. It's enough that we're busy thinking, making through the things ourselves. Don't bother me, I'm reading. Don't bother me, I'm playing a computer game. I got my culture, I don't want to think of anything else. So there's many circumstances and situations in life where our mind is not being supported, it's being challenged, but it's not being nurtured or supported. We're trying to make sense of the things in a narrow way, and we're often missing other things that can be way more important. So a lot of times these things just come up, they go by, we go through it, and that's just life, big deal. But every now and then it comes up and it's tied up to a bigger problem, and we have a mental dilemma that we have to figure things out, and sometimes that can get very confusing, lost. We can lose our bearings, we can be too fixed in our judgments, we can be so many ways this mind can work. So you're not going to be quick to define someone's intellect to them from a natal chart. You're going to be looking at it, you're going to be wondering, and you're going to start seeing how it works. And every now and then it's useful to say, oh, That's not the way you can see when someone's going off their way of processing. So when people get lost or confused and they want to make sense out of things, you can start to study, you can ask other people. There's so many ways you can try and get more information. And often, out of all the information we can get, how much of the information have you gotten today? How much of it was good and how much of it was meaningless and how much of it was bad? Was there more good than bad? Rarely. Usually each day there's more negative thinking about things than keeping the mind a clear, useful, awake tool is a really big mystical challenge. And it can happen by a kid at home who can do that. Doesn't have to have an education to have an alertness. So the education you have, how far your education is going, isn't the example of how well you think. It's just a manner of being conditioned, and you want to develop as much education as you can, but you're still going to get education from experiences in life. And someone can be very alert and very alive and very physical, very dynamic life without even having gone to school. But they may not be as socially interactive. So, okay. So when it comes to thinking and making sense of things, it primarily is we're assessing our memories, our feelings, our memories, our nutrition, and trying to work with as much nutrition as we got to think as clear as we can, or to think of the past and project it forward. But then it gets more complicated when we start having experience outside of us, around us, to each person, to other people around us. Our mind goes out of ourselves and into ourselves, and is trying to see which is most important. So sometimes it's difficult for Mercury to have that. It can make quick associations, but can have difficulty getting depth perceptions. So, okay, let's just, when we